Good morning. Today is Sunday, August 25th, 2024. Re'ei ani nosein lifnechem hayom bracha uklala. This week's Torah portion begins with the words, Re'ei, which is the name of the Parsha of Re'ei. See, God says to the Jewish people, I am placing before you today blessing and curse. If you follow my commandments, there will be blessing, and if you don't, then there are going to be lots of problems. In the early 1900s, there was a rabbi named Dov Cohen. He was born in Seattle, Washington. Jewish family, but at that time in Seattle, there was a tremendous amount of assimilation. And his parents saw the way that things were going in America for Jews in the early 1920s. And his parents decided that they were going to send Dov Cohen as a 14-year-old boy to study in yeshiva in Israel. It was a very unusual thing to do because Israel at that time was a very difficult experience, a hard life, and they chose to send him to the yeshiva in Hebron. Now, at that time, Hebron was a very primitive and isolated village. Of course, Hebron, the south of Israel, has a very important history, but at that time in the 1920s, it was not an easy place to live, and there were not many people doing it. But there was a yeshiva there. It was actually a very famous yeshiva. It was the relocated Slobodka Yeshiva led by the very famous Rabbi Tzvi Hersh. And so, in spite of how out of the way it was and how primitive the conditions were, for the select students who chose this, it was a very important place. And Dov Cohen was 14 years old. I cannot even imagine an American boy growing up in an assimilated environment and then traveling to Hebron in 1920s. And of course, in 1929, Dov was there at the terrible massacre of the yeshiva students and the residents, the Jewish residents of Hebron, one of the worst anti-Semitic pogroms of those years. He was one of the few survivors. He studied hard in yeshiva. He advanced. He became a Torah scholar, a teacher. He remained in Israel for the rest of his life. He wrote books on Jewish law. He wrote an autobiography of his life, which it's an incredible life. And a number of times, he would travel back to America to visit his family. And you should be able to understand that when he came back to America in later years, he was very uncomfortable because he had become used to the pure spirituality, the lack of materialism in Israel. And he came back to America. He traveled through New York. And just to say, New York was very much the opposite of that. And he found it very difficult. He found it jarring. He didn't like it. Came back a couple of times to visit his parents, but it was a real culture shock when he did so. One time that he came back to America, he found himself on a Sunday morning in a taxi cab. And the taxi cab driver had the radio on. Now, in those days, and it's still true in a lot of places today, Sunday mornings on the radio, what you mostly hear is Christian preachers preaching their messages, and in a certain kind of style. I don't want to overgeneralize, but it was very, very common where I grew up. I guess in later years, these became television evangelists, and very fire and brimstone type preachers, and certainly not something that a yeshiva bachar living in Israel is really interested in hearing. All right, but he's in the taxi, and he doesn't want to tell the taxi driver he has to turn it off. And so the taxi driver has the radio, and there's this preacher, and he's kind of yelling his message. And all of a sudden, Dov Cohen, sitting in the back seat, this yeshiva bachar from Hebron, starts to listen to a story that this preacher is telling. Now, here's the story that the preacher is telling. Of course, it's from his point of view, from his religious outlook. But the story goes like this. The story goes that the preacher told there was a group of angels, and this was the group that was involved in increasing the enrollment down there, meaning to get people to sin and to be sent to hell. And this was the group of angels. I guess it was the monthly executive meeting of this group of angels. How do we get more people to sin and be sent down to hell? That's the setting. So the preacher is telling this story. This executive board of angels of the recruitment center, so to speak, they're discussing, how do we do this? So one person said, you know what we'll do? We'll go down to people and we'll encourage them to steal. And if we encourage more people to steal, then they're going to be punished. And we'll get more people in that place because they'll be punished. The other angel said, it's not going to work. Because, there are all kinds of laws against stealing. And most people don't want to steal. It's just not going to be... It's not going to work to try to persuade more people to steal. So another one had a good idea. He said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go down there. We're going to convince more people to lie. Oh, very good. The more people you get to lie, every time they lie, they're telling a sin. They're going to be punished. We'll get more people to be punished for their sins if we get people to lie. And another one said, that's not going to work. That's not going to work because you know what? When people lie, they may lie, but they're still going to feel guilty about it. And it's not going to be successful. So they're all trying to think, what can we do to get more people to sin, more people to be punished? And finally, one of the members of this committee comes up with this idea, and everyone agrees this is the perfect idea. And here's what this angel says. The angel says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go down to people and we're going to convince them to do good deeds. We're going to convince them to do acts of loving kindness. We're going to convince them to give more charity. We're going to convince them that they should be committed to justice for every single person. But we're going to tell them that all of these things, don't do it today, do it tomorrow. Re'eh ani nosein lifnechem hayom bracha uklala. Rabbi Tzvi Hersh Weinreb points out the emphasis is on the word hayom. See, God says, I place before you today blessing and curse. If you do the right thing today, it will be a blessing. if you put it off tomorrow, it could very well end up being the opposite. For lots of reasons. Because first of all, tomorrow might not come. Or tomorrow you might change your mind. Or tomorrow you might not have the opportunity. Tomorrow you might forget about it. If you do it today, that's a blessing. If it's tomorrow, no telling what will happen. See, I have given you today, this day, now, and not later to perform the good deed. And if you do it now, it will be a blessing. If you procrastinate, you may not do it ever at all. And the result will be quite different from a blessing. This is such an important lesson in every area of our life. That if we have the idea, we have the opportunity to do something that is positive, do it now, hayom, today. Because all the good intentions don't help unless they're acted upon. And the longer the delay, the less chance we're going to act on it. Now I want to add a layer to this. And this comes from Rabbi Eyal Vered, who was a teacher in Israel. And this is such an important idea, not just to add a layer to this, but to have a better understanding of how this works. Because when the Torah when we emphasize the word in the Torah, hayom, that we've got to do it today, that if we do it today, it is a blessing. Listen to what Rabbi Vered says. No matter what happened yesterday or the day before yesterday, you have the possibility to start anew today and choose between good and bad. So God is saying to us, hayom, today I want you to choose good. Maybe you didn't choose good yesterday. God forbid. But you do not need to be bound by what you chose yesterday. You can focus on today. Hayom, today is different. Today is separate from yesterday. And just because you chose the other way yesterday, don't be bound by that. Today is separate. Choose the right thing today. Our success in life, in our spiritual lives, in our moral lives, in every area of our life, our success is seeing our lives divided into days, not as just one ongoing unit of time, but differentiated day by day. It's a very important idea. Because when I see my life as differentiated into days, that means that every day stands alone. Every day carries with it its own independence and carries with it its own possibility to begin anew. That is the real meaning of the ability to choose between right or wrong. The real meaning of that is I'm not bound by what I chose before. I can choose today to do it differently. And I'm also not bound by what's going to happen tomorrow. I would like to choose the right thing tomorrow, but even if I choose the wrong thing tomorrow, today stands by itself. And it is only with this view of time that I see today as independent, standing by itself. That's what gives me the opportunity to choose what is right, to choose what is blessing today. Rabbi Vered writes, the biggest thief of today is tomorrow. The illusion that today is like tomorrow and also like yesterday, that illusion must be shattered. Every day is a one-time occurrence. And he points this out every morning in our morning brachos. Among the first blessings we say in the morning, we thank God for our ability lahavchin ben yom ben laila, to differentiate between day and night. I mean, It's not so difficult to differentiate between day and night. Before I went to sleep last night, it was nighttime. Today I wake up, it's daytime. But it's so much deeper to differentiate. Lahavchin, to differentiate between day and night, means that I recognize when I get up this morning, it is a new day. And I am not bound by what I did yesterday. I can choose to do it differently. And I'm also not bound by what I think might happen tomorrow. That will be its own new day. I have to choose now, hayom. I have to choose bracha. I have to choose blessing. Hayom, focusing that today is an independent day, that requires that today is separate from tomorrow. And therefore do it today. And it's separate from yesterday. And it is only because it's separate from yesterday, and it is separate from tomorrow, that is the only way that makes possible improvement and change. And ultimately, redemption. My friends, I wish you a great day today, and that it be a day when we choose blessing. And I look forward to seeing you all soon in person.